it's probably some aspect of beauty that I'm looking for in music, or truthfulness, something like that. That I need to find in the piece. It doesn't have to sound nice. No, that's not what I'm talking about. It doesn't have to sound sentimental for it to be beautiful or worthy. No, but just, well, we all know what's beauty. Yeah, we cannot often verbalize what it is, but we know it.
Leibniz Lugt's Programma Vienna Balsi. Today we are very glad to receive Reinis Zarinch. Reinis Zarinch is a piano performer as a soloist and also in trio Palladio. He performed in North America, Europe and Latvia, where he received 4 times the Grand Awards of Music in the category Outstanding Performance. He recently released an album dedicated to Peter Isvask piano works. Thank you very much for being with us tonight. My first question would be about how you became a piano player, how you studied music, what were the people you met that on your road encourage you on practicing piano. Why specifically this instrument?
All right. So, well, first of all, thank you for having me here. It's nice. It's nice here, and it's not as hot as outside. These days we are filming in the hot peak in the summer of 2022. Yes. And well, about my beginnings in music. Well, short story or long story?
We have time, so you can do a long story if you want.
All right. Well, I think well, my family is not musical necessarily, so it doesn't make immediate sense that I would start off playing anything. But we had a piano, and I find that a lot of families of the previous generations had a piano at home and had a very basic education in music as a norm here, and so did my grandmother. I never heard her play piano. I think I didn't, but my mom says that she played quite well, could play the Moonlight Sonata, at least the first movement, so she was reading the text and she could play simple things. So the instrument was there, and when I started my first things, then often she said, "Oh, you're lying! Oh, you're lying again," because I played the wrong note. And so, in that sense, I had a quality control at home. But then, in the primary school, I met our singing teacher, who actually was a concert pianist who needed extra income. And his way of playing those simple songs, incredibly colorful, tasty, that's how I usually call it, that just grabbed me, and I stayed near the piano after every lesson, and he soon noticed my interest and asked if I would like to learn any of this, and so I wanted, and turned out he has a private studio, and so I started learning. Soon turned out that he he had a very particular teaching method to help very young kids grow very quickly. And I was, it seems, one of his best students in that sense. So he traveled with me in Latvia and also in Russia very early on, giving lectures about his method and showing me as the guinea pig. And so, I started when I was 7, so that was already when I was 8 and 9, I was traveling like that. My teacher's name is Rene Salaks, and he still teaches in Jāzeps Mediņš Music School, as far as I know. Haven't met him for a while. And then, of course, competitions came and all these things that seem to be the usual fare for all young pianists who have some skill. And, you know, the first performances with orchestras when I was 9, and first prize winnings when I was 10, and so on and so forth. And then I moved to Emīls Dārziņš Special Music School, which is where I actually live nearby there now. So my youngest child is now going there. So there's already circle happening there. I studied with Rafi Haradžanyan, who taught my first teacher. So I had like a generational continuation. And Rafi Haradžanyan was, we wouldn't say world famous, but at least this part of the world famous in his piano duo called Riga Piano Duo. And so he also encouraged me to play in a piano duo setting, which was the first chamber music experience. Well, not the first, but one of the early ones that I had. And he provided me with countless opportunities to perform, which I think is very important, that you not just learn, but you get to try it out and face your fear many times so that you learn how to deal with it. And that was that period. And at a certain point, I graduated and the music academy, 2 years in Riga. But while in the academy, I went for masterclasses in Holland, which are quite well known now, Holland Music Sessions. And there I met a professor from Yale University whom I really liked. His way was very different at those very few lessons that I had, and he liked me. And after those 2 weeks, he asked if I would like to study with him. Now, Yale, of course, as all the American universities, is first of all very expensive. Yes, it is good place to be in, but it is very expensive, ridiculously expensive, so that people live with those debts for decades to come. But a year later, a Christian couple, alumni who had from Yale, decided to donate $100 million to Yale School of Music. Yale School of Music is a tiny school in the midst of the big university. Just to this tiny school, they donated $100 million. And as a result, the school became tuition free. My professor, Boris Berman, invited me again. I applied, there was a competition, and I got in. So I studied with him for 3 years at Yale. And it was a very important time, I would say, because he started as if from the beginning again, not destroying everything, but making sense of everything. Previously I learned intuitively, now I learned with my mind as well, and to use emotions with my mind as well. So all these things suddenly became not just intuitive, but kind of deliberate. Yeah. was and is a Russian school. I just was in touch with him, and so it's a little bit like kind of strong way of doing things. So after Yale, I applied to several places, and we ended up. I say because I already had a family by then. We ended up in London, Royal Academy of Music, where I continued studies with Christopher Elton, who turned out to be the complete opposite to Boris Berman. The two are friends, but they are so opposite. And what can I say? In the end, I've gained all sides of the spectrum. Like, I've seen that kind of teaching and this kind of. So what I gained from Christopher Elton was a very intuitive sense, again, back to that, but not in a childish way, more as something that's, let's try things and play. And so that ended 10 years ago when I graduated, and it was a conscious decision not to continue for another degree, which I saw many of my colleagues did, because it's cozy to stay in a university.
Yeah. Are you a teacher yourself, or not at all?
I've taught once in a while here and there, but I don't teach regularly here. Not because I don't want to necessarily, but I don't seek it, because at the moment I'm still quite busy performing, and I would say that I see it as my main task. So on the side I could teach, and I sometimes do teach, and if someone wants to study, they can get in touch with me quite easily, and probably it would work out privately. But I haven't sought it because of, for example, in an institution, teaching often goes together with a lot of bureaucratic, however you call it, but it's not just the teaching, but so many other things that you have to deal with, which takes time and energy, and so at some point, yes, but not at the moment. So here I am 10 years after graduating, and I'm performing most of the time, teaching sometimes, and then doing some other things also.
Did you see the movie Whiplash?
Whiplash.
Yeah.
Whiplash. I did see it. It's memorable.
Yeah, because some moment you describe sounds a little bit in this kind of mood, very hard.
Harsh.
Yeah.
And of course I think it probably, for the movie to work, it was shown in an extreme way.
Yeah, sure, indeed.
It might be.
Yeah.
But what I have heard from the Russian school in general, that it often is wild and violent even. But then people from that side might actually be used to it and not take it so seriously. Whereas the more mild Western people don't know what to do with this kind of attitude. But I can only say the best things about my Yale professor, Boris Berman. It's just that he had a strong kind of opinion about things, and I really needed it at the time, something to hold on to that doesn't fluctuate too much. And then when I had grown and understood at least the very fundamental basic things myself, then these intuitive teachings from London were just right, I would say. I could play. So.
How do you enter into a particular score of a composer? What is the door for you? Do you start by something more intellectual, more intuitive? Do you want to get some more information? Do you listen to other interpretations that have been made in the past to have a first point of view? How do you proceed?
You mean when I have already picked the piece?
Yes.
Decided that I want to do it?
Or maybe the question of picking the piece before, feeling that you are ready for some composers or some pieces and not for others, is already a relevant question indeed.
Yeah, well, in my mind, the picking of a piece is a different thing from when I have picked and how do I approach it. I remember that at school in Latvia, for a very long time, I was told, or maybe I heard it from others, but somehow I got this impression that, for example, you shouldn't play Brahms as a kid, because it's playable, technically playable. It's not, a lot of it is not that technically difficult, but that the meaning of it will not be there because you haven't seen a thing yet in life, And when you said not ready for it, that's the first thing that came to me. But now I play Brahms a lot, and it's his music is something that has helped me a lot during the pandemic as well. I'm not sure how I pick pieces. I have this thing that I can read quite easily. Mm-hmm. It comes from my mother's help. When I was small, she encouraged me to read music at home at the piano, and she sat next to me and she turned my pages whenever the time came to turn, so that I wouldn't have to stop in the middle to turn. And so she could follow the music quite well. And we went to libraries, music libraries, and just browsed, searched for something new, something interesting, especially in summertime. And this was one of our greatest joys. And as a result, doing this year after year, my sight reading became, I would say, very good. And so when I take a piece, I not only, if I open it, I can kind of hear how it sounds just by looking at it, but if I sit down, I can also play it more or less. Maybe not very fast things immediately, but more or less I could get what it is immediately. And with new pieces especially, this is valuable because you don't have recordings often done just yet. Mm-hmm. So you have to be able to find a way to get to know the piece. So this reading thing has always been fun. Now my mother doesn't turn my pages. When she comes as a guest to our place, we actually keep doing that just for fun. But I have my tablet and I can turn my pages with my pedal. So I don't have to stop while I read. And reading through things really helps me to see how it feels under hands, physically, how the piece works, and also to immediately grasp the feeling how it might sound like when perceived by others. And that's something I also keep as an important point, that it's important how people perceive it in the first time, because the second time might never come. So there has to be something in the piece, that at least something that can be grasped immediately and not enjoyed necessarily, but appreciated in some sense. And of course people differ, but yeah, it's probably some aspect of beauty that I'm looking for in music, or truthfulness, something like that I need to find in the piece. It doesn't have to sound nice. No, that's not what I'm talking about. It doesn't have to sound sentimental. for it to be beautiful or worthy. No, but just, well, we all know what's beauty. Yeah, we cannot often verbalize what it is, but we know it. And so that's what I'm intuitively seeking, I think. So when I pick a piece, then the text is number one, of course, because we should be able to work with just the text, unless we have more. Then, if it's a dead composer, then I would Google up things about the piece if possible. I would go deep if I have time. I remember I spent a lot of time with Schumann's Kreisleriana, just to understand why he gave this cycle of piano works this title. What has it to do with Hofmann's writings? Because Hofmann created the character Kapellmeister Kreisler. What has that to do with Schumann and his life situation? Because it's quite a mystery, unless you work through it and untangle all the bits. And so I remember reading quite a lot of books until it clicked for me, and yeah, so that was a happy moment.
Keep in mind that me and my spouse create this content on our own. This is a huge workload. To support us, use the PayPal link in the banner or go on paypal.me/Vienna Balsi to help us continue this work. And now, enjoy watching.
Not all pieces have stories attached to them, nor they have to have. But I like to know whatever I can know about the composer. Of course, I'm always limited with time. I don't have all the time in the world to read countless books and hear and listen to everything. I just get what I can. Internet helps a lot. But then, if I get a living composer, that's the best. Because in a sense, I think that music is an extension of a human personality, human being. It's just an extension. So the human being is more valuable than the piece that he or she writes. But the piece that they write reveals them, their point of view, these things. It may teach something, and so chatting with a living composer about just general things of life is so valuable to me, because it's so much more than just the notes that they give me, the PDF that they send me. I just went yesterday. I saw Georgs Pelēcis. We are talking about he's 75 this year, and we are thinking of a solo recital program with his music. And so he showed me his bunch of pieces, and but then also we looked through the window. Oh, here's the Maxima grocery shop, and he could just jump out of the window from the ground floor and go to the Maxima shop in his slippers or in his pajamas and buy stuff and come back through the window. He's 75, but I mean, we could joke like that. And then he showed me his earliest piece he wrote when he was in the 11th grade. So how is it in 11. klasse? So 11th grade probably is the way to call it. No one knows the piece. He hasn't published it, but he showed me the manuscript, and it's quite a crazy piece. And I said, well, what is this? This is not you at all. And he doesn't play. He has arthritis now, but he goes to the piano, bangs it open, and starts to play this very, very fast and like mad, like crazy, and plays it from memory. He remembers this speech from 11th grade, and just so I will always remember how he did it, like this character that he just showed me. And when I try to play that piece, it's just invaluable, I would say. Similarly with Pēteris Vasks, we just did this album, and he composed a new work for me to include in this album. So again, he didn't just give me a score, deal with it. He invited me to his place, and we talked about why this piece, and he revealed some very private things that inspired him, that painful things that inspired him to write this piece. Now I see that he never talks about it publicly, and so I also don't talk about these things, but I know them. And when I play this piece, I sharply feel these things. I think about him and how it came about that he wrote this work. Also, he played the whole thing for me from top to bottom. And seeing him play those notes in his way is a very particular way. I count it as something super valuable that he played that music for me, because he doesn't play it. Well, of course he plays what's written, but he uses such nuances that one cannot write in the score. Or if one tried, it would look so complicated that we wouldn't know what to do with it. And so he writes in a traditional way, but he plays it differently. And just seeing him do it, I asked him, are you doing this deliberately? That you're not going straight, but like this? And he said, well, yeah, of course. I mean, this is how it goes. And so, yes, I had previously heard two of my colleagues, older colleagues, 10 and 15 years older, saying something along these lines. And I wondered, where did they get that information? How do they know that it should be played, that Vasks should be played like that? But then he played it like that himself, and now I see where they got that from. And so I think it's just fantastic if one can get that. And of course, not always these relationships are so personal as with these people. Sometimes it's just purely musical things, but still, I think everyone gains a lot if they have this interaction. Even now in the pandemic, because of the pandemic, even though I prepared several premieres, I couldn't meet with the composers face to face. I was afraid that we would meet and then one of us would have COVID and then I would have to cancel the concert. So I decided, okay, let's just do recordings. I'll send you an MP3, you listen and tell me what you think, and we'll exchange like that. So that was purely musical exchange, and still we fixed many wrong notes that were there, because when the composer hears, oh no, I don't want this, let's change it. They need to hear it back, how the music sounds. And we even fixed one coda. It was too short, let's make it longer, because the whole thing doesn't fit quite well. It needs to be lengthened. These kinds of things. So that's why I say it's with the living people, it's the best. Even if they are considered geniuses from people standing aside, standing in the audience, when you meet them, you just find out that they are normal human beings, and you can understand each other better, and you can understand the music better, and I think everyone gains by that.
Is it different, or does it bring something special if the composer is Latvian? Do you feel more connected to him in a certain way?
I don't know, because I haven't had this kind of relationship with foreign composers just yet. So far, the contemporary music that I play from abroad is often by living composers, but I just don't know how to get in touch with them, and so I use what I have. I use the score, and I read what I can, and I listen to recordings. But I think something with language has to do with it, that you can say a half word and you're understood, and it's just something you can never get when you use not your mother tongue, I think. But I'm not so tied to Latvian music per se. I'm looking for beautiful music from everywhere. So
yeah, it seems that the first quality of a performer, or the way you decided to do it, or the way you feel it, is to read and listen. The first thing you do, in fact, listen to some people, read a score, and I feel like you are some kind of sponge, and really you, with huge empathy, you want to make something really yours, and all of this raw material will eventually be heard and transformed, and then there is some kind of translation in something else when you are playing the piece.
Yeah, I think that I'm both very critical of what I read, and also when I have chosen to play the piece, then I'm very open to it, and I let it take over me, and I want to make it work, even if I see things that are, to my eyes, dry professionalism, let's call it. To my eyes, they are maybe not so great. Some connection points, some things, in pieces. There are always. I want to make them work. I will do what I can to help the piece reach the audience in the best way, to give compliment to the composer. I feel that we just need each other. Composers need the performers, performers need composers, and it's a great responsibility. But when I've chosen the piece, yeah.
When you record something, do you have some particular expectations in terms of sound, on the way you work with the sound engineer or the producer of a record, in terms of space, in terms of presence or dynamic? Do you work on this, or do you only focus on performing inside the studio?
The experience of recording has not been always straightforward for me at all. It's not like I have the whole complex of options available. and just pick and choose whatever you like and try out. Most of the time there are limitations. The instrument starts to fall apart soon after, so the tuner must go there. The time is short for the recording sessions. The hall itself acoustically has its limitations, so it can have what it can, but not much else. And then there is, of course, the view of the sound engineer, how it should sound in his eyes or her eyes, in ears, I should say, not eyes. And so in the midst of all of that is my interpretation that I need to hold together over several takes, and stopping and starting. So I'm mainly concerned always with what I do, just to hold it together. And what I've found is that the result is judged very differently by different people, because it seems people have different tastes on this. Taste about how the sound should be. And I haven't had a situation where several independent professionals would all agree on something about sound. They each have their own way of seeing things and what they think is better than others and what is bad. And so in the end I feel like how can I know this? How can I have the time to learn and really know these things, even aside from what I do, aside from my main thing? So I let these things be, and in the end I'm left to see from the feedback of people what they say, also about the sound, and then I can decide what to do onwards.
Sound engineers can be very obsessional people sometimes, also with their little manic habits and wanting the sound to be in a specific way, and it can be difficult. Yes.
You know what I find also, when you listen back to it on a different set of equipment, it sounds so different. And how can you then say, well, this is the standard equipment and you must listen on it? Everyone will have a different equipment at home, and many people will just be listening in the car or on their headphones, cheap headphones, expensive headphones, and speakers, all of these different options. Yeah, I must say that I feel like I don't understand these things, but I don't also see a way how I can really understand them, because it's something you should spend years on probably to understand it.
So I understand that maybe you prefer live performance as rather than studio recording?
Much more, yeah. With all its difficulties and mistakes that usually always happen to everyone, with all that, the living audience, I especially felt it during the COVID that we didn't have the people there. There's a huge difference when it's an empty hall and it's silent, and it's a packed hall and it's dead silent. It's a huge difference for the performer. And I must say, I'm so grateful that I often have audiences who are dead silent, even when it's packed. And so I would not change it for anything else, really. I mean, I would change it for some other things, but recording in the end doesn't reach, it reaches people, but classical music that I do is not, by definition, is not that popular nowadays. I'm not playing mainstream music that much, and so if I think what I'm looking for for myself, what gain do I look for, then a live performance, of course, is much more beneficial also for me, just to give me back this feeling that, okay, let's keep going, let's keep doing this because it's worth it. With an album, it's much less of this kind of feedback that one can get. One gets reviews. Some friends sometimes write, "Oh, I listened to your CD, it was nice," but that's about it.
Yeah, with a positive thing that it's kept somewhere, and the live performance can be recorded, but and the feedback is instant. Yeah. I saw you perform the Goldberg variations in Zintari, and it was a great moment. Sincerely, it was really great. And I saw you, it was my feeling, I saw you really deeply focused on that, because there is a huge history for this particular piece of Bach music, especially since Glenn Gould was playing it. So I would be curious to know how you came to play this particular piece, and there will be about this a question after that, about how you prepare for live.
Well, Goldberg was scary because of what you said, because of its history. But when was it? I mean, was it before the pandemic, I think, right? 19 or something?
No, we were wearing masks in Zintari, so it's a moment where it started to open a little bit, and I think it's something like February 2021, I think.
Yeah. All right, I've completely forgotten this, but so I was asked if I would be willing to do this piece, and I said openly that I have never learned it before. I'm not the one traveling around with Goldberg. This is new for me, but I had their trust, and so I prepared. But what I find interesting is that before I started learning, say, Gould's recording was what I liked a lot, especially the later one. But when I learned the piece, and this is the case with most pieces that I learn, when I've learned it, I don't like the recordings. I listen to them just to check if maybe I've missed something, what people play, maybe there's a wrong note I've learned that I've not noticed. And that helps, of course. Sometimes I notice these things. But all in all, I don't like the recordings. And that means that in the meanwhile, I've come to my own reading, and that's my own, and that just should be this way. So in particular, I remembered that with Goldberg, I was looking to make the piece as one whole, not like a bunch of variations that just keep going and going and going, but how to hold it together as if possible, with one breath, that you start and here you finish. And I struggled quite a lot with that, but I think I found some solution with that. And I'd like to play it again. Thank you for reminding me this. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is an extraordinary piece of piano. It's not to give. Well, I don't like numbers, but how many times, for example, did you work to prepare for this particular concert? It was.
How many times I worked? Yeah. What do you mean? How many days? How many
days, weeks, or
how long it takes?
Yeah, how long it takes.
It really depends. So sometimes sometimes the schedule, when we plan something in, say, 10 months, 12 months onward, it's empty, and then by the time it comes, it's full of everything else, and so there's very little time for each separate concert. But with this one, I spent considerable time. I think it was half a year or so, intensely. Yeah. You look like that. If
No, I'm
be unbelievably
yeah.
short or long.
both. I don't know. Long. But half a year to prepare for this.
Of course, I did other things, but those
Yeah.
other things were probably
Yeah.
something I had played before, just keeping
Yeah.
it in shape. But
Yeah.
this was the main task, and I think because of its history, I was quite kind of afraid. Let's just spend. Well, in comparison, this is an hour-long piece, less maybe. I prepared Messiaen's 20 Regards on Newborn Christ. Well, that's a 2-hour piece, and I took several years to actually bring it together. Now when I want to perform it, I also need at least 6 weeks because I play it from memory, and to bring it back and remember and try it out again in front of some friends. It all takes a lot of time. Yeah, I don't play everything from memory nowadays. I find that I can do more if I use score. Playing from memory for pianists has been this kind of traditional thing for ever since, I don't know, Liszt maybe. I haven't looked at this history so much, but it has been like a tradition. Not so much for other instruments, maybe for violin as well. But other instruments usually play with the music. But pianists, it's not a show-off necessarily. And for me, playing from memory is liberating, because if I have the score, I need to follow it to know, just in case something happens, I have to turn my pages. I have to know with my eyes where I am exactly on the score, and it ties me. It's more even risky to play with the score sometimes, but when it's from memory, then I can really be with the music and perform as if I wrote it and created it, and so I become one with it.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. It really becomes a part of you. Yeah. Do you have a special, I would say, way of life or things that you try to avoid regarding to be ready when the concert comes? Some healthy way of life, I would say. There used to be this legend that some pianists have some insurance for their hands. The Lloyd Company, I think, in the UK makes some insurances for that. Or I was maybe this is a stupid question. Do you avoid to do things with your hands, or not yet?
It makes sense to ask this, because I need this. But do I cut my vegetables? I do. When I wash dishes, and I do a lot, but I try to be careful. I know the places where I can injure with knives and other sharper things. But all in all, somehow I haven't injured my hands or anything. I asked about it as a joke last week, and turned out that in Latvia you cannot insure your hands or any other body part. It just doesn't work. The companies do not offer this. So, but I get this question quite often about insuring my hands. So, I trust God Almighty, my Creator, and so I don't need to, worry that. Well, if He wants to take this away from me, then of course He will take, even without injuring me, So, in that sense, I think I live trusting that it's a gift that God has given, and I will be able to use it as long as He wants me to. So,
have you ever been tempted by? Well, that would occur earlier, I suppose, in your training and education. But have you ever been tempted by improvisation in jazz or?
Yeah. I do that for myself as a therapy once in a while, especially when it's really tough and I don't want to see anyone. One solution would be to go out of the city and be in the nature. That's where I would return to some kind of balance. But another way would be to play, improvise something, and express my condition. So it's quite wild when I do it. It's not nice. It's crazy. But because of that, because I use it in this way, that's why I'm not doing it publicly.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a personal thing, and when sometimes I can improvise some little things. I can sit down and play something nice. I can play at any moment, but it wouldn't be very meaningful stuff.
Do you record sometimes some pieces?
Yeah.
So no chance, if I understand, that someday the audience will be able to hear that, or maybe under a nickname, I don't know.
Maybe nickname. Nowadays one can publish anything on Spotify, right? And so one can, take a nickname. And I've toyed with this idea because I recorded these improvisations and made a selection of them and gave them to my wife as a gift. And so I sometimes, listening back to them many times, I thought, okay, well, maybe I could transcribe this stuff and play it in a concert again. Because some of these pieces do sound like something that could be played as a piece. But then, if you would ask me, would I compose? I've tried that too, but I struggle that I cannot make up my mind what's the best. I write this and I think, no, you could do better, and make another version. Oh no, let's try the third version, and I'm never satisfied, and so it's a pain and it doesn't lead anywhere. So improvisation at least happens and then it's gone, and but with
Is there a composer or a particular piece you are hesitating to pick? That was something that you will
hesitating to
play. Hesitating to play. You maybe some future projects of, or are you afraid by a particular composer so far, and that it's come later?
Before the pandemic started, I almost pulled myself together to learn Messiaen's catalog of birds, and that's 3-hour piece, maybe 3.5-hour piece, and it's very complex, very difficult thing to do. I learned part of it and I played it for friends, and then everything closed. The pandemic came. I even had 2 dates to perform it and just didn't come to anything. So now I've forgotten all of that, and it will take a lot of time to bring back. I'd like to have a date with that, because I need a date to do it. It's so hard. Another thing is, that's in a sense much easier. Still, Stravinsky wrote this Rite of Spring, and everyone knows the music more or less, parts of it at least, but it's almost never played by a solo pianist, because it's so much stuff there. There's like everything, the whole orchestra is playing most of the time, and it's very, heavy and loud and all over the place. There is a version that I found that is very close, that it kind of reaches most of the things, but it requires the third hand, and I haven't grown my third hand yet, so it's something that I'd like to learn, because it's very effective as I see it in the score and I try to play it, but it just takes a lot of time to do. And some sections just need to be reworked in that edition, because they skip too many important things to be able to play something. But I need those things, so I have to find a way to play everything at the same time. And so, a 4-hand version is very popular. So, 2 hands, it should be close enough, but it's very, very difficult. But very powerful. I don't know. I mean, nowadays with this whole situation in the world, that it feels like wanting to play Russian music is difficult. For promoters, they are kind of a little bit like, oh, maybe it's not the right time. Do you have something else? And so I don't know. So I keep that also on my to-do list, but not yet, not just today.
We won't stop reading Dostoevsky to understand human nature. So, well, that's one of the bad things of this war, and that's, yeah.
I think it's temporary, of course, this kind of attitude, because people will understand that without Dostoevsky we are nowhere. We don't understand the thing.
Yes.
But with text it's different. With music is so abstract in a sense, and then it's not abstract, and so it carries stories and carries overtones, extra musical overtones for people, and so it's not that easy.
And what about the Concerto in G by Ravel? I would be curious to hear you and listen to you playing it. With its
What does it mean for you, that piece?
a lot of things. It is. It can be in France or about some reviewers. It can be a bit controversial because we used to have this very typical standard interpretation by Sanson-François. And it was a great interpretation, but I think we can do really something else now. And that's the question is, some interpretations are still interesting, valuable, and shall remain as records. But we can have a fresh view in present time about a piece of music that has been written at the beginning of, 20th century. Also, the Concerto in D for the left hand is something that I find meaningful. Well, connected for me to a lot of things. And there is a moment of melancholia and also joys and creativity in this particular concerto in G. In the Adagio Assai is, I think. Well, I it's sincerely I hear you bringing something to this piece of music.
Well, thank you. That's very, very interesting that you mentioned a very specific piece. I have played it actually.
Oh.
for me, concerto in G, the most special is of course the slope movement, and for me it's perfect. I mean, it couldn't have anything different there. It's just perfect, and it's like the whole life is in there, in very few words, it seems. So it's unforgettable piece, and I wish I could play it more often. But I mean, with orchestras, it's not as easy. You cannot get to play that often. And I've played the left hand concerto also. But what I remember about the left hand also is the cadenza, which is quite melancholic. And
so we were talking about future concert, maybe future pieces of music you will play. Is there any future records that is scheduled after this one at Ondine label?
Well, not scheduled, but in the planning, yes. So Messiaen's 20 Regards on the Newborn Christ. It's something that I've played in many years, and I have a particular relationship with the piece. And it's played rarely, and it's still played only by very few people. So I hope that will come to a recording as well. And then this Peletsis music, I mean, there are several Latvian composers whose music could actually be put in an album of just their music, and so I'm planning these things at the moment. And also trying to understand what to do with Vask's album, because it's released, but then what do you make of it, and so yeah. But recording, as I already said, is not the primary thing that I'm looking for, and so I need to be reminded that one needs to do some CDs as well, because I'm quite absorbed with the performances and so.
Oh, my last question will be: you mentioned things about early memories of you playing piano with your mom, but what is your earliest memory about connected to sound or music in your childhood?
There's always, I mean, I lived in a flat on the top floor, 4th floor, quite high up above the houses all around. I could see very far off, see the sunsets and sunrises. And especially winters are so long here, and this little, to be honest, in English I don't know this bird's name, but the zeelite. And this bird, this tiny little bird with kind of bluish and yellowish tummy, is a very beautiful little bird for Esper, and it comes in winter time, and we fed it, and many of them, and they have this very small little melodic that they sing, but it's always the same, similar to cuckoo, yeah, and just a kind of narrower interval, and because we fed these birds, then we heard them sing a lot. And I don't know if that's the first thing, but that's something that I heard a lot at home from the very, very beginning. And yeah, now that I want to play Messiaen's Catalogue d'Oiseaux, it's interesting that I see those French birds there. And there's not this one that I just talked about, but there are so many that I recognize, and I really want to make them sound like they are in real life. So yeah.
That's interesting. Thank you for being with us. I think we heard that how much you are involved inside performing, and it was a great moment.
Thank you, Joe.
If you enjoy watching this content, drop a like, subscribe, share on social network to help the growth of this channel. and we will see you here very soon.